all of our clients are set up. So really the only thing we need to do is to tell Ansible exactly which clients it's in charge of, because right now Ansible doesn't know who to reach out and touch. So all of our little penguins here are ready to be controlled. We just have to tell Ansible exactly which ones they are. Now there are a few options we can do for individual hosts. We're going to do that. You can actually specify groups so that we can manage and do things to a group of computers as opposed to doing them one by one. And if you have a whole bunch of computers, like let's say you're managing some labs of computers, it's possible to specify ranges instead of typing out every single name of every host that we need to configure. But it's really easy to do. So let's go ahead and configure our Ansible inventory and get Ansible to start doing some stuff. So right now our lab is set up so that we can SSH into our different computers over here and be able to sudo to get privileged access on those computers. But we need to tell Ansible which computers they actually are. So to do that, we're going to say sudo vi etc Ansible hosts. All right, now this is a file. It will already exist, but we're going to go right down to the end. Now there's a bunch of examples you can look at here, but I want to show you some examples so that you know exactly how it works. So let's add to the bottom of this file. Now the first thing that we can do is just start spelling out our host names. We can say Ubuntu, CentOS, and repo. And honestly, that would be enough for Ansible to know that those are the three hosts that we need to connect to. However, I want to do a couple more things. I want to set up some groups. I want to say, let's see, make a group called GUI. So we'll put that in brackets, and now everything below this, below GUI, is going to be part of the GUI group. Now the repo server doesn't have a GUI, so let's make that no GUI. All right, now it is possible to put computers in multiple groups. So let's say we had like a web server group and a database server group, and we happen to have a computer that had both a database server and a web server. We could put it in both groups so that when we do something to the database servers, it is affected, and when we do things to just the web servers, it's also affected. So this isn't just a like pick a group and it has to be there. They can be in multiple groups. However, in our case, we're just going to have these two groups. We're going to have Ubuntu and CentOS in one, and the repo server that doesn't have a GUI interface in the other. Now, do you remember the repo server does not have the Nugget 1 user? When we SSH into that, we actually have to specify the user that it's going to be using because it's not Nugget 1. In that case, we can actually just put a space and then say Ansible underscore user equals administrator. Okay, so now the repo server is still defined here, so this is the host, and this is a flag, or this is a variable that we've set for that particular host. Ansible underscore user equals administrator. So now when it tries to connect to repo, rather than using the default, which is whatever our current user is, in our case Nugget 1, instead of doing that, it's going to use administrator to connect. All right, so that's kind of cool. Now, I want to show you, even though we don't have a lab set up, this does support some pretty cool things, like it supports a range. So let's say we wanted to have like lab, we could say lab, open brackets, 01:05, close brackets. And now, in the lab group, we're going to have 5 different hosts specified. Now we could say lab 1, lab 2, lab 3, lab 4, lab 5. However, if we do this, it's going to say lab 01, lab 02, lab 03. Well, it's not going to say that, but it's going to be as if we typed it out by hand. And that's really, really nice. You can also do ranges of letters like lab A:(F). It's going to do lab A, lab B, lab C, lab D. So it's possible to do ranges in here so we don't have to specify each and every computer. You can also do ranges in an IP address. So let's say instead of this, we were going to do 172.20.0 dot open brackets 1:6. Right, so if we did that, it would specify, actually it would specify all of our computers because repo is in there. Repo is 172.20.0.1, and then Ubuntu and CentOS are .5 and .6, right? So we would be specifying 6 different computers. Only 3 of them would be active, but this is how we would specify it. It was by doing this range. All right, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually get rid of that because we've specified all of our computers by hand, but I do need to leave this Ansible user there in place. Now there are some other things we could also add in here. In fact, I have loaded in a browser window here. This is, if you go to docs.ansible.com, this is the intro inventory page, and this gives you a whole bunch of different commands that you can use inside your hosts file. So for example, we did Ansible user. That's the default SSH username. We changed it to administrator. But let's say SSH is running on a different port. We could specify that. Let's say that we wanted to call it Garfield, but the actual host didn't resolve to that. We wanted to specify a particular IP address. We could do that. We could say, okay, I'm going to call this one Garfield. However, rather than doing a DNS lookup of Garfield, I want you to do Ansible hosts equals 172.20.0.5 or something like that. So you can specify an IP address. There's a bunch of them here. Ansible SSH pass. Not a great idea to store it in plain text, but you could actually put the SSH password right in that hosts file if you didn't have it set up to do passwordless SSH, where we set up keys. If you didn't do that, you could put the password right in the file. Now, in a later nugget when we talk about securing, we're going to learn how to actually put things in a vault so that they're encrypted. Right now, you don't need to do this because we set up those passwordless key phrases to SSH over to the computers. But this is here, it's worth looking at. It gives you more examples of how you can set up groups and all sorts of stuff. So if you want to check out the Ansible documentation, that's awesome. This is the inventory section that talks about how to set up that hosts file. For us though, we've already set this up, so I'm going to save this. And now it's all configured for us to use because Ansible isn't a service running. It's something that we're going to start by typing Ansible. So we've done this before and we set it up. Let's actually say Ansible -m, we'll say ping for the ping module, and we're going to say all. So we want it to ping all of our hosts that are set up. Now, all right now means 3 different ones because we have 3 different hosts configured, so it's going to try to do the ping module on all 3 of them. Press enter. Oh, and we got some responses. So CentOS responded with success. Okay, ping, it responded with a pong. Ubuntu responded ping pong. However, the repo server failed. Now why would it fail? Well, we know that we changed it to administrator, but if you look here, user bin Python is not found. So even though we do not have to install an agent on our particular computers, there's no Ansible agent, if we want to use a lot of these modules, we are going to have Python installed on the remote computer. Now, there are still things we could do with Ansible. I don't want you to say, Sean, you said we didn't need to install anything. Well, that's true. For example, if we want to use a module called raw, so let's do that. Let's say Ansible -m module raw dash the action I want to take, let me move the mouse out of the way, is user bin uptime all. Now this should work. What it does, rather than using Python to control on the other side, it actually sends a raw command, and the raw command is what's in here. All right, and it did that. It actually sent it to repo, and there was success. It actually told us the uptime. That's the response from the uptime command. It's been up, it looks like 12 minutes. They've all been up 12 minutes. I started this lab up 12 minutes ago. But you can see it actually worked on all of them using the raw module. But we actually want Python installed because we're going to do a whole bunch of really cool stuff that goes beyond the raw command module. We want to be able to do things remotely. So let's actually go over there. SSH administrator at repo sudo apt-get install Python. All right, let's install Python on the computer so that we can actually use all the features that Ansible is going to provide for us. All right, so now it's installed. Let's exit back out of here. Let's clear our screen. So here we are back at Nugget 1. We're in the Ansible server, Nugget 1 user. Let's actually do something new. Let's say Ansible -m. I'm going to use the shell module. We're going to talk about modules later. Don't worry too much if I'm losing you here. What I want to do is have you see some of the things that Ansible can do using these ad hoc commands. So I'm going to use the shell command, which is going to issue a shell command on the remote computers. And I want that to be -a. Now, I could have used raw, but I want to use shell so I don't have to type out the full path. And let's actually say Python -V in single quotes. And I want this done on all of them. Now what this should do is it should show us what version of Python is installed. And sure enough, on the Ubuntu box, it's 12.7.12. On repo, it's 2.7.12. On repo, it's 2.7.12. And on CentOS, it's 2.7.5. Now that's okay that this is a little bit older version. CentOS just happens to have that installed, but it's 2.7. That's a perfectly acceptable version of Python for us to be using. All right, and also I've used all every single time, but we don't have to do that. We could actually say Ansible-m shell. Instead of all, let's say no GUI. Now we should just get a response from repo. Awesome. Let's do the same thing, but this time say the group GUI. Now we should get a response from the two, Ubuntu and CentOS. So you see, the way you set up the host file allows you to do different things based on what group you say. But all is going to do just what it says. Every single defined user in the host file, it's going to try the command on. All right, so we are set up. We have our host file configured properly because we're able to do this. We get a success every time. And that's really all there is to set up the host file so that we're able to control our inventory from this one central place. I kind of hope you're like me and you're starting to dream about what we can do with our Ansible server now that it knows about all of our different host computers. It's really awesome what we're going to be able to do. So make sure that your host files are set up. Maybe play with them a little bit. Make different groups. See if you can make things work. Maybe change hosts and set up a range. See if you can do a range of IP addresses and get them to respond that way. Regardless, I want you to understand what's happening with the inventory so when we move on, it's clear what's happening behind the scenes. I'm glad you stayed with me this far because Ansible is about to get just really awesome with the powerful things we can do. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.